Well, welcome everyone. It is my pleasure to be here today to host the High Seas Treaty and Latin America's role in leading ocean conservation today with collaboration between NRDC and the Wilson Center. My name is Lisa Spear. I direct the International Oceans Program with Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC. And again, it's my delight and pleasure to be here to talk about collaboration between the United States and Chile to advance our joint goals. So as we all know, the High Seas Treaty was a signal achievement, a major step forward for the ocean and for the billions of people who rely on it for economic and food sustenance. The treaty will strengthen conservation and management over 2/3 of the world's ocean that constitutes the high seas. And that amounts to almost half the surface of the planet. So here is an opportunity for conservation and ecological and economic improvement in food security improvement on a global scale. But of course, the treaty won't be worth the paper it's written on unless it's implemented effectively. And that will require work and action on two fronts. The first, 60 countries need to ratify the treaty in order for it to enter into force. And a number of countries are committed to trying to do that before the June 2025 UN Ocean Conference. So we're in the race to get to 60 by June of 2025. And the second is to begin now to lay the groundwork for implementation so that when we get to 60 ratifications and when the treaty enters into force, we're ready to go and can jump off the block and get going on implementing the conservation provisions of the new treaty. So we are very grateful to the government of Chile for being one of the first to ratify the treaty. And in doing so, Chile has once again demonstrated its groundbreaking leadership in this space, as reflected in Chile's 2019 announcement that it is seeking designation of Sala y Gomez and the Nazca Ridge off of Chile and Peru as the first high seas MPA, and its achievement of fully and highly protecting 42% of its domestic waters. It's an amazing accomplishment. So the world, the ocean, and all of us owe Chile a huge thanks for its amazing leadership in that regard. The United States, too, has also played a key and important role in leading the way on the High Seas Treaty, in particular in the difficult last hours of the treaty negotiations when, led by our panel moderator, Monica Medina, the U.S. was instrumental in getting the treaty over the finish line. So we look forward to working with the United States to be similarly ambitious with respect to implementation of the new treaty, including, for example, by announcing its support for the Chile's designation or Chile's proposal to fully and highly protect Sala y Gomez as a high seas MPA. A second thing the U.S. could do is seek similar protection for the Emperor seamounts, for example, in the Pacific Ocean. And Chile and the United States could work together to tee up additional MPAs, which together will constitute the first generation of high seas protected areas. So with that introduction, it is my honor to introduce His Excellency Alberto van Claveren, former ambassador of Chile to the European Union, agent of Chile to the International Court of Justice, and now Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Good morning, good afternoon for all of you. This is Lisa Spear, Director of International Oceans Program, Natural Resources Defense Council. Mrs. Monica Medina, former Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Oceans and International Environment and Scientific Affairs. U.S. Department of State, and Ms. Malette Mesfin, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Ocean, Fisheries, and Polar Affairs of the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs of the U.S. Department of State. Dear friends, I have the pleasure to provide opening remarks for this important webinar dedicated to the role of Latin America in the protection of the ocean, and particularly about the opportunities presented by the BBNJ Treaty, also known as the High Seas Treaty. The BBNJ agreement is a real demonstration that multilateralism can achieve important outcomes. In this case, the agreement is the only instrument to date that allows us to effectively protect and use in a sustainable manner the biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. This is not a minor achievement. In other words, the BBNJ is an instrument to preserve the biodiversity of half of the planet. At the same time, it is potentially a key vehicle to discover, protect, and explore the benefits of hundreds of thousands of new species from the high seas, still unknown to all of us. This is the only way to ensure that the ocean continues to provide us with vital ecosystem services, sustain our economies, and offer climate solutions for current and future generations. Chile is committed to the success of these efforts. Our National Congress quickly ratified the treaty with support from all political sectors and became the second country in the world to join the BBNJ agreement. We, as a country, have also proposed to host the seat of the BBNJ Secretariat in our port city of Valparaiso. This is also a contribution to ensure that the agreement's implementation includes a perspective from the global south and to help decentralize the United Nations global governance, which is heavily concentrated in developed countries. In this regard, let me underline that there are no global headquarters of the UN system in our region in Latin America. Looking ahead, we are convinced that we must move swiftly into implementation. The BBNJ agreement is crucial to achieving the 30 by 30 target, and therefore we need to have a portfolio of MPAs to submit to the BBNJ COP at its first session. This is why we are concentrating our efforts on the Nazca, Sala y Gomez Ridge, one of the most important biodiversity hotspots in the ocean. Our aim is that this could be the first marine protected area in the high seas to be adopted by the BBNJ COP in full coordination with other relevant international frameworks and regional agreements. The challenges are clear, as well as the opportunities. It is time now to work decisively towards the early entry into force of the BBNJ agreement. Up to now, only 5 countries have ratified this agreement. We are still very far away from the 60 ratifications needed. With this in mind, we strongly urge all countries to sign and ratify the High Seas Treaty as soon as possible. Our invitation is also to expand our knowledge about the high seas and how the BBNJ agreement and the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas can help us to provide safe and sustainable governance for these vast areas crucial to humankind. This webinar, organized by the very prestigious Wilson Center, is a concrete contribution in this direction. We look forward to this discussion and we wish you a very successful exchange of views. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Minister Van Claveren, and thank you for your leadership, your outstanding leadership in ocean conservation. You're a real inspiration to all of us.
Thank you.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce Monica Medina, former Principal Deputy Administrator of the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration in the Obama administration. And in the Biden administration, the former Assistant Secretary of State for Oceans, Environment, and Science. In that latter capacity, Monica participated personally in the negotiation of the treaty, including staying through to the very bitter end over the 36-hour marathon of talks that finally led to an agreement. And she caught intermittent bouts of sleep on a couch in the Cotter Lounge in the United Nations building. I can testify, I saw it myself. So welcome, Monica. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's an honor to be here today and to help moderate a wonderful panel. I want to take a minute and acknowledge, Lisa, your leadership through the decade-long process of negotiating this agreement and Chile's leadership during that same time. It was an honor to have the minister here to talk about the importance of this agreement, and their leadership has been instrumental in ocean conservation for many, many years. And it's just wonderful to be at this point where we can be thinking ahead about the first generation of high seas protected areas. I loved the way the minister talked about that. It gave me goosebumps just to think about it. Most people don't really appreciate that until we had this agreement, there was no way to provide the kind of governance we would need to create protected areas in the ocean, in the high seas, in those areas beyond national jurisdiction. And it is so important today for the interconnected crises of biodiversity loss and climate change that we get a handle on protecting this vast part of the planet. The planet is 70% ocean, and more than half of that is in the high seas, or almost half of that is in the high seas. So in these areas beyond national jurisdiction. So this agreement couldn't come at a better time, at a more important time. And in fact, we do need 60 nations to ratify it. And this particular region, because of its interest, because of its engagement, has been particularly important and will be particularly important in the future going forward, getting to that 60 nations in ratification. And it couldn't be a more valuable role for the region to play. Many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean region have spoken up. In fact, even as we speak today, there is an important meeting happening in the Caribbean on ocean conservation and developing states and the importance of the blue economy to these areas. So this is front and center and couldn't be a more vital topic. And we often think of the oceans as too big to fail because they're giant, they're massive, they're sort of beyond our view, the high seas, but they are vital to our conserving our planet. They are the lifeblood of the planet. So as we discuss the benefits of the treaty today, we are faced with this immediate climate crisis in the ocean, this historic warming trend, the El Nino, and all kinds of manifestations of that are impacting us on land, from the vast heat waves in places like Mexico, where we know that the heat is having huge impact on biodiversity loss. Howler monkeys are actually dropping dead in trees, falling out of trees. And we know that in Brazil, major flooding has been a huge problem. So we are determined, I think those of us who've worked so hard to get to this point, we're determined to see the treaty go into effect. And so today we're going to have a discussion about that, about why it matters to this region and how this region can lead us forward into that first generation, the creation of the first generation of high seas protected areas. And we are very lucky to have with us two experts. We have Deputy Assistant Secretary Mylette Mesfin, who leads the State Department's work on oceans, fisheries, and the polar regions. And she has a deep background in science and technology. She has a PhD in bioengineering from the University of Pennsylvania. And in addition, we have a wonderful diplomat who worked very, very hard in the wee hours of the morning as well to bring the treaty, the agreement across the finish line. Julio Cordano, a leading diplomat in Chile's foreign ministry who heads their Department of Climate Change and Sustainable Development. And I can say, the way Lisa said about my being there, I know Julio was there during the wee hours of the morning, really helping to find the word tweaks, the little ways that we could move this ahead. And he knows what a challenge it was to get to yes. And he's been a leader on climate for many, many years. He was instrumental during Chile's own presidency of the climate COP25. And he's been a leader in these negotiations. So we're pleased to have both of them here to have a conversation about how do we make progress now? Where are the key avenues for us to make progress today? So I want to ask you both. I want to start with a question for both of you. And maybe Mylette, we can start with you. From your perspective, sitting in the U.S. government, how is Latin America playing a leadership role, and how are you in the U.S. government helping them help the world get this treaty into effect?
Well, thank you so much, Monica, and to the Wilson Center for inviting me to be a part of this important conversation. I'm really pleased to be able to join with everyone today. I think maybe doesn't need to be said for this group, but it's really important to remember how important the ocean is as the heart of really our climate system. When we think both about the open ocean and coastal ocean being really key carbon sinks for our planet. And science tells us that the ocean as a whole absorbs about 30% of carbon dioxide released into our atmosphere. If we also look to science to understand the role of MPAs and really how important marine protected areas are to make a difference in safeguarding the health of ocean ecosystems, conserving biodiversity, replenishing fish populations, and supporting really economic activity that leads and is directly linked to people's lives and livelihoods. And so, if we think about the thousands of MPAs and marine conservation areas that have been set up around the world, they currently only cover about 8% of the ocean. And looking at those, they vary widely in terms of the levels of protection and enforcement. And so, in the United States, we support the global goal of conserving or protecting 30% of the global ocean by 2030 in our 30 by 30 goal. And I think we think about this along three different lines of effort. The first being coastal states and the important role that they have in protecting the ocean within our national jurisdiction. Those are areas that cover 1/3 of the ocean, and we've already heard the ways in which Chile has been leading in the conservation and protection of marine protected areas within their national jurisdiction. And we in the United States are also working on our ways in which we're advancing the 30 by 30 target within the United States. So we have coastal states and the important role they play. Also thinking about regional and collaborative efforts and working together on marine protected areas through those means is really being important to understanding how we get to this 30% goal. And here again, Latin America is really leading the way in thinking about regional efforts and establishing large-scale corridors and MPAs within areas of national jurisdiction. That includes through the establishment of the Eastern Tropical Pacific Marine Corridor, or CMAR, by Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Panama. It's an effort that we are pleased to support in the United States. We're also pleased to be a member of the Americas for the Protection of the Ocean Coalition, which is led by Chile. And that brings together, 9 countries on the Pacific coast of the Americas to coordinate actions related to protection and sustainability of ecosystems. And then finally, we come to the conversation for today, which is really 2/3 of the ocean, the high seas. And that's where the BB&J agreement comes in. And it's really, again, monumental in terms of, for the first time, having this coordinated approach to MPAs on the high seas, and how critical this is to get to our overall 30 by 30 goals. And so, it's clear if we want to think about the protection of the oceans, it requires really a combined, collaborative, multifaceted effort, whether that's national governments, national action, regional action, and action in areas beyond national jurisdiction. It's important for Latin America, it's important for the United States, and it's really important for the world. So I'm glad to be able to work together with Chile and others on these efforts. Thank you.
Thanks, Molette. It's really great to see the U.S. government helping and being a good neighbor, and also working to help that whole of the Pacific cooperation that Chile's spearheading. It's great to have U.S. leadership at the table there. So Julio, let's talk about the agreement itself. You were there in the wee hours, and through the many years that led up to those crazy moments at the end when we were all working so hard to get this over the finish line and get an agreement. Talk about the role of the region over the years, and then particularly at the end, because you and I had some conversations at the time about the region and what it would take to get agreement among the countries in your region, and then how that could help bring the rest of the world along. So give us some insights into the role that Chile played and the region played in getting this agreement over the finish line.
Thank you very much, Monica and Lisa and Malette, for this opportunity, also to the Wilson Center. Yes, in fact, now we look back to those days. I think it's quite amazing. It's quite amazing what we managed to achieve. I think we also took advantage of the political momentum that we were living through, also very much under the leadership of the president of the conference from Singapore, that I think play a very important role. But at the same time, I think it was a very important achievement because we managed to get a high bar on ambition. I think the agreement is very comprehensive, responding to the mandates that it had from the very beginning, covering very technical issues, and at the same time providing the certainties, the political certainties, that it will serve the purpose that it was created for. And there are mechanisms in the text that allow us to see with confidence that it will not be used for other purposes, that it was a topic of the discussion at some point, and therefore it's a very comprehensive and coherent set of regulations for the high seas that really sets us in a position to start implementing as soon as possible. From the point of view of the region, of course, the region, Latin America, comes from a very long history of engagement with ocean issues. We always are very proud to say in our interventions that the concept of 200 miles was created in a joint effort by Chile, Peru, and Ecuador in the Declaration of Santiago in 1952, that created this concept in the first place, proposed this concept to the world, and then it was taken up by the negotiations of UNCLOS, and was later on adopted as the exclusive economic zone. And we've been, making this kind of contributions for a long time, and that, I guess, also allow us to create a group of Latin American countries that really cover many different perspectives, many different even political perspectives, but united around an ambitious vision on the importance of protecting the ocean and the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. And this group was called CLAM, as you may remember, that united 15 countries of the region, which is quite an achievement for a region that doesn't always find the possibility to coordinate positions in international negotiations. And I think CLAM, the group itself, was very clear about the importance of having a result that included, for example, a robust environmental impact assessment system, a very clear and at the same time robust, scientifically robust process to create marine protected areas in the high seas, and also, very importantly, a system of fair distribution of the benefits from marine genetic resources. That it is also connected to another very important issue that CLAM really spearheaded, which is all the financial issues around in the text. So the outcome is I think we have very much has the fingerprints of Latin America. Is everywhere, and we recognize ourselves in the outcome, and therefore we believe that now the task is just started, and it just started in order to be ratified as soon as possible, as our minister just said, and we're very happy to have finalized our own process internally, and we are a party to the BBNJ agreement since February, and we are calling on everybody else really to join us. We don't want to feel alone in this exclusive group. We want to be accompanied by many other countries, and as soon as possible, see the BBNJ agreement enter into force.
Thank you, Julio, for that wonderful, both sort of taking that the story is taking us back to the very beginning of the leadership in the region and Chile's leadership, as well as recounting actually what's in the agreement, which was really so ambitious, as you say. It covers 4 major topics: creation of marine protected areas, assessment of impacts on the marine environment by major activities in the high seas, the sharing of benefits, and then the financial mechanisms to make sure that all countries can share in those benefits. Those are 4 really pivotal aspects of the agreement, and I hope people will come away from this topic, this conversation, understanding how challenging it was to get agreement on all 4 of those things at the same time. And I think really when you talked about the richness of biodiversity in your region, that was a driving impact or a driving force behind all of the work that the countries of CLAM undertook. And you have, I think, shown the world in a huge way the importance of that biodiversity. So tell us, I'm going to turn back to you again, Julio, to tell us a little bit more about that next generation. Chile actually proposed a high seas MPA before we had this agreement, and that was a great way for us to focus on the future, to think about the possibilities of these kinds of marine protected areas on the high seas. So tell us a little bit about Sala y Gomez and the Nazca Ridges MPA, and why. Tell us about its beauty. I think people think of the high seas as so far out there. They're kind of, there's vastness and there's nothing there, but there's so much there. So tell us a little bit, paint a little bit of a picture of that area, and then tell us how you all saw yourself creating this marine protected area before there was even the ability, the means to do it.
I think it's a reason of pride from us to really count it, or to share the story about how this came up, and I think this is also one of the examples of how the ocean is a bipartisan issue in Chile. Governments change, authorities continue evolving and change, but at the same time, there is a common agenda that continues. And I'm saying this because originally, the idea of protecting this seamount in the high seas came from a previous government in Chile. And the current government has seen the importance of the continuity of these policies and making sure that our contributions remain consistent over time, and at the same time, we provide credibility to our efforts. The importance of the Nazca and Sally Gomez reach is such that it's been identified by the CBD as an EPSA, right? An ecologically biological significant area, and it probably among the scientific community is one of the most relevant to be protected. So the science is telling us we need to take clear action about this. And, and I think we need to be very transparent and very honest about it. The very fact that we internally in Chile have created so many marine protected areas have created some level of debate. To what extent conservation and sustainable use of the ocean can stand in the balance? And now we are saying that we are going to go beyond our natural jurisdiction and we're going to create another marine protected areas, even where Chile doesn't have national jurisdiction. And I think it's very important to say that we're working on the principle that in order to have a vibrant ocean economy, you need to also to have a robust protection and conservation policy. So in order to use, you need to protect. So and those things go hand in hand. And this is why we're proposing these measures in the high seas, because precisely the Nazca Ridge and Sally Gomez seamount represent a unique area in the open ocean that has a very high level of endemism. Among other things, because if you see in the map, the ridge starts in South America and extends all the way down to Rapa Nui. And in fact, Rapa Nui, Easter Island, is the highest peak in the ridge. So this is also a reason why we identify so much with it, because Rapa Nui, Easter Island in Chile, is very much part of it. And we have already created an MPA in Rapa Nui, very closely working with partners like the United States, and we are very grateful for that. But protecting the whole of the seamount is a continuation, it's a projection of the measures that we have already taken. And if you see in the map, you will see that even though there is a connection with South America, there are two natural barriers that isolates the Nazca Ridge from the South American continent. One is the Humboldt Current that goes from the south to north and sort of isolates with its water the ecosystems that lives there. And the other thing is that right in front of the South American continent, there is a very deep trench, one of the deepest in the world, and that also isolates the Nazca Ridge from the South American continent. So the habitats that exist there and the ecosystems that exist there are very unique because of that reason. And science has shown that underwater seamounts are booming with life everywhere. There's so much life in there, and for the reasons that I was saying, there is a lot of endemism there, and also the Nazca Ridge serves the purpose of feeding for many species. It's a nursery for many species as well. So plays a very important role in the ecosystems of the whole South Pacific. So this is why the first step that we took, of course, in anticipation of the BBNJ entering into force, is to propose a close look at the Nazca Ridge in the SPRIFMO, in the South Pacific Regional Fisheries Organization. And last year, in the meeting of the commission of SPRIFMO, we proposed a very concrete measure, which is to ask the scientific committee of the SPRIFMO to look into this, and it will have a permanent agenda item in their deliberation in order to propose and to study the Nazca Ridge and to propose measures to the Commission, which is the sort of the political body of the Commission of the SPRIFMO. So next year, early next year, we will have the meeting of the Commission of SPRIFMO in Chile. Probably not in Santiago, because we want to get closer to the sea, and probably in the south of Chile, but there's still a decision to be made. And the idea is to receive the recommendations from the scientific committee on the Nazca Ridge and take appropriate decision. And this is very important because we want this to build from the science up, to have evidence, and at the end of the day, try to convey the message that in order to sustainably use the ocean, you need to protect it at the same time. And we believe that having this area protected, it will be a key tool in order to achieve that goal.
I agree completely. And I will say, just thinking about what you described, you know, for most people, they don't get to see that deep, vast, unbelievably biodiverse area that lies under the surface of the ocean. But you can imagine the Grand Canyon or the highest Andes Mountains or the highest Rockies Mountains in the US, for those of us here. That's what it's like under the ocean. And what we're trying to do by comparison is to create those kinds of legacy parks like we see in these amazing places on land. And as Deputy Assistant Secretary Mesfin said at the beginning, very little of the ocean is actually protected that way. And yet it has some of this incredible biodiversity, rich, really fantastic creatures that we've only just begun to explore. But if we don't protect them, they could be gone. The other thing you said that was so important, Julio, was how these areas are connected. Unlike sometimes mountains on land that divide, you know, that serve as barriers, the ocean does overtop these areas. And so there is a lot of connectivity that people might not fully appreciate based on the currents and the biodiversity that traverses long distances. So the ocean really does, even as far out as the middle of the Pacific Ocean, as you were talking about, it is connected to the land in Chile and up and down the west coast of South America. So it is amazing to think about the potential that's out there. And I do want to go back and recognize Rina Lee, the chair of the negotiation from Singapore, who was recently recognized as one of Time's 100 most important people of last year because of the work she did and the amazing role she played. So I think it's important to recognize her efforts being beyond anyone else's, any other single person's efforts in bringing this about. So thank you, Rina. I hope you're watching. Millette, I want to take that another step and say I also watched the U.S. government play a hugely important role in our lead negotiator, Elizabeth Kim. I want to give her a hat tip as well. She was instrumental. It's important to recognize the people who really spent so much time putting themselves across in this agreement, trying to bridge divides, talk to people, understand the importance of diplomacy. So Millette, tell me about the importance of U.S. diplomacy and why it was so important that the U.S. was there in those negotiating sessions, even as we are not, unfortunately, a member of the Law of the Sea Convention. We did play a role, and we had a wonderful negotiator in Elizabeth. But why does U.S. participation matter? And then, of course, I've got to ask you if you were able to sort of see a way in which the U.S. actually might ratify the BBNJ agreement.
Well, thank you so much. And also for your shout out to Elizabeth, who did so much work over the years, along with many people, to get to the place where we are now. And we really were so pleased to be able to join Chile and over 80 countries in signing BB&J last September. A lot of this work happened before I got here, but I think just the way in which it was very clear how important it was that the U.S. was a part of this process has come up a number of times. And so we're glad to be there and bring this along to where we are now and have to really acknowledge Chile's leadership in being among the first to ratify BB&J. And also it's offer to host the Secretariat, as we've heard. Our presence was important and continues to be important as we, navigate this current moment in time. The BB&J agreement is really a high priority for the U.S. And we've begun our domestic process to join. You already outlined a number of the ways that BB&J was really a monumental achievement, and whether it relates to sort of the meaningful science-based conservation measures, the capacity building, the promotion of marine scientific research. It's an agreement that accomplishes so many of the things that we wanted to see and more. I think where we are in this moment in time is while we work on our domestic process, there's a number of things that we can continue to do in the U.S. in partnership with Chile, Latin America, and around the world to move towards the next steps in thinking about successful BB&J implementation. And so, I think that means, three main areas of focus. And we've already heard it in terms of how we got here, which is keeping political ambitions high. And I think that continues to be something that we must all work together. The foreign minister already said this, but we continue to encourage all countries who haven't signed the agreement to do so, and continue to take the necessary steps to pursue ratification as we are here in the United States. A second area of focus as we think about it now is helping to build capacity. We know that many countries lack the capacity really to be able to pursue ratification and prepare for agreement entering into force. And so, as one example of how we are supporting this, as a member of the JEF Council, we supported the decision to open $34 million in JEF funding for assistance to BB&J ratification. And, we'll look forward to approving the first projects this summer. And we're hopeful that any Latin American countries that need assistance in ratification will be able to pursue this JEF funding. And, we continue to look for additional opportunities to build capacity around these efforts. And the third area where we see sort of potential, leadership across the board and where we are working hard is engaging in the BB&J Preparatory Commission, or the PrepCom conference. So in April of this year, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution to create a BB&J PrepCom to prepare for entry into force of the agreement and for thinking about convening the first BB&J conference of the parties, which will be something that can move forward once we get to that magic number of 60. But we see robust participation in the PrepCom process right now as being really critical for laying the groundwork for the COP's substantive work that they'll be able to take forward once that is convened. And so, we participate in the PrepCom and again, look forward to working with countries in Latin America and beyond on the upcoming meetings and prep for that. And so, while we again continue to work through our domestic process, there are a number of other ways that we can continue to work together collectively and as a U.S. government in advancing the progress towards successful implementation.
Thank you, Millette. And I will add that I really sincerely hope that the U.S. Senate will ratify this agreement, if not soon, eventually, because it is so important to U.S. interests. And I can honestly say, having been at the table in some negotiations and agreements where the U.S. was a party and not at the table in others, it matters. It matters for the U.S. to be able to be a leader in the world. It matters for our own U.S. domestic interests. When we can't sit at the table, it's especially hard to be a really constructive party in an agreement. Of course, I know that we are always constructive in the U.S. We always want to be a good collaborator with our colleagues in other countries, but it really helps when you're a member of an agreement. Let's talk about the geopolitics of treaties, because it's difficult. It's difficult to find alignment and agreement among so many countries. And this was remarkable, again, because we were able to get agreement from everyone to go ahead and, settle on the language of the agreement. But there are areas where we don't always agree with other countries. Countries don't always get along. Some of that has to do with important resources in the ocean, like fisheries. And we know that some countries over-subsidize fishing vessels and fleets, and fishing was a major part of what we had to figure out how to get to align with the goals of this agreement, and how to handle regional fishery management organizations and their role. And we do have a huge problem with illegal fishing on the high seas. Even with all of the efforts at management that are happening out there, we do have an awful challenge when it comes to ending the theft of the riches of the ocean by actors who are not playing by the rules as they've been set. So I would be curious how each of you, Malette and Julio, think about how this agreement might help to solve some of those challenges, and why it was so important to get it over the finish line in order to help solve some of those challenges of competing demands on ocean resources. Julio, I don't know if you would like to start.
Sure. Thank you very much for this question and for bringing this up. I think it's if you look at the overall ocean agenda, definitely IUU issues are very much at the top. And Chile is also very concerned about that. We are contributing to clarity and transparency on the fisheries information. And in fact, our own authorities are committing to a standard of transparency that is aiming as high as we can. And I think we're on a good track there. At the same time, I think it's important to say that when we talk about protecting biodiversity in the high seas, it is very difficult to look away from the issues of fisheries. And at the same time, I think it's important to recognize that the United Nations has already an implementation agreement, which is the New York Stockfish Agreement, that deals with fisheries. And that was one of the sticky points in the negotiations. And the text itself of the BBNJ agreement say that fisheries in general will not be included in the work of the BBNJ unless they're related to the extraction of genetic resources in the high seas. So there is some caveats there that will work in the connection with the fisheries. But at the same time, as I was saying before, it's very difficult really to imagine that BBNJ will ignore fisheries activities as such a force that can have an impact on biodiversity in the high seas. And that's where the agreement is balanced in the sense that the agreement will have to consult and will have to work with other frameworks, right? We always say that if you look for the word cooperation or collaboration in the text, you will find hundreds of references, because precisely the BBNJ agreement has that mandate to make sure that fits into the overall governance structure of the ocean. And that definitely will include, for example, regional fisheries organization. And this is why, for example, we propose the Nazca Ridge protection to start in our own RFMO, right? Because we know that the BBNJ will have to talk to them in order to get what we want to achieve in the BBNJ agreement. So as as usually happens, it will be a complex connection between fisheries and the BBNJ. And the same thing goes, for example, with seabed mining, for example, which we also been very active promoting a precautionary pause in the ISA. There is an ISA authority that looks into this, but at the same time, how can we, forget about this issue just because there is another organization that looks after it, considering that seabed mining will have a very deep impact in the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction. So there you have a situation where the BBNJ agreement will have its own core business, but at the same time will have to work on the fringes of the mandates of other organizations. And I think that is very, very well reflected in the text of the agreement itself. So there you go. It's going to be a very challenging task.
I agree, and you actually read my mind on the deep seabed mining agreement that is in the process of being negotiated now, and the importance of how it will interplay with this agreement. And you answered that very, very well. And I know that's on a lot of people's minds right now, because it is such an important other use, extractive use of the ocean that could have such damaging effects if we don't have a good, strong agreement. And it is important to protect areas in advance of that kind of development. So this agreement, again, couldn't be more timely. Let's talk for a minute about an area of the world that I know matters to both the U.S. and Chile, which is the Antarctic. One of the other places where there's been an effort to bring about high seas high seas protections in this really important part of the planet right now, particularly as we are thinking about climate change and we see the stresses of climate change, particularly in the polar regions. So I'd be interested in hearing about your efforts on Antarctic protection and how that might relate as well to this high seas, these high seas protected areas outside of the Antarctic, which is covered by a different treaty. Julio, maybe you could start.
Yes, sure. I can just briefly reflect on that. And this is, I guess, together with the US, we share not only an interest in this topic, but also a frustration in this topic. And I think it's very clear that we've been pushing for a long time now in the creation of marine protected areas in the Camelar area. And unfortunately, for reasons that are very well known, we haven't been able to go through that procedure. We will keep insisting, and I think as time goes by, we are continuing improving our own knowledge of that area, and also reaffirming our conviction that this is important, and we will continue moving in that direction. But let me just say also that the connection with the Antarctic Treaty System and BBNJ was also one of our issues of concern, and we needed to have a clear understanding that the principle of not undermine, as it is reflected in the text, was going to be recognized and also be a centerpiece of the connection between BBNJ and other organizations. And this is very important because, as you know, the Antarctic Treaty System is a well-consolidated regime, and we want to keep it as it is, and we want to make sure that it is strengthened through the connection with the BBNJ and not weakened. And I think we are in a good sense of direction that we will have a very virtuous connection between the two regimes. But I agree. I think we need to continue pushing for the protection of the Antarctic waters, and this is why Chile and the U.S. of course we are pushing in the same direction.
Millette?
Yeah, thanks so much. And, I might combine sort of my response to this and what I would have said to the other one, but also just want to also acknowledge, our team right now is out at the Antarctic Treaty meetings. And so these are active conversations that are happening across multiple bodies. But, not surprisingly, I agree very much with Julio's sort of assessment of when we think about BB&J, the agreement itself, and how it doesn't necessarily, it's not in isolation. It really is in sort of this network of all of the international agreements and sort of governance structures that we already have in place, whether that's sort of the UN fish stocks agreement and thinking about fisheries issues, whether that's the RFMOs, the work of the International Maritime Organization and International Seabed Authorities. I think, all of these regional and sectoral bodies really manage within their areas of competence. And so it's really a question of how we work together across all of these bodies, thinking about sort of our overall objectives when it comes to conservation and sustainable use of sort of the ocean and resources. And just, in thinking about BB&J, how it adds value to this current sort of patchwork system that helps to create a sort of a mechanism looking more broadly about conservation in the high seas, and taking into account all of the things that are ongoing there. And, back to the Southern Ocean, I think if we think about our global 30 by 30 goals, we have to really think about MPAs in that region. And again, really grateful for the work that we do in collaboration with, Argentina and Chile and many others in Latin America, and thinking about the protection of waters surrounding the Antarctic Peninsula. And they're very active in ongoing conversations, including right now as we speak. And so it's really important work that we're doing together.
It is so important. It is so important. And I just have one last quick question for both of you, thinking about how we were able in a treaty system to create a very large marine protected area in the Antarctic. It took a lot of political will. How do you think you build that kind of political will in just a few, sentences? What's the key to building that political will as we go forward and look for more high seas marine protected areas like the one in the Antarctic? Millette, do you want to start? Or go ahead, Julio. Go ahead.
No, please, please.
I would just say, I mean, going back to sort of the Salas and Gomez and the Nazca Ridges, one of the things that's really incredible is kind of the images and the research that has been coming out of, for example, the Schmidt Ocean Institute, the recent exhibition there, where you're just really seeing sort of and shining a spotlight on the incredible ecosystem that exists there, and things that you would never see, with your naked eye, but really brings attention to just how precious of a system that is, and thinking about the importance of protecting it. So, I think that those types of things are really important, again, to help understand what it is that we're really talking about in areas where people don't get to see, again, with their naked eye. But, I would just also say that, again, this keeping of the political momentum and the ambitions as we think about all the ways in which things change around the world, but our ocean, our global ocean is consistent and shared amongst us, is continuing to reinforce that message is quite important, whether that's through RFMOs, whether that's through BB&J, whether that's through so many of the other conversations we have. I would just point to that as opportunities. But over to Julio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I fully agree with that. I endorse fully those remarks, and I think it's absolutely crucial that we have better science and better communicated science. Melette was making reference to the Falcon 2 expedition and that we saw in Valparaiso just a couple of months ago. And we had the chance to see some of the images there. It was quite astonishing, really, to see the variety of biodiversity that exists there, and I guess the natural curiosity to study them, right? But at the same time, I think I would add as well that we need to have a more awareness-raising effort for people to understand how important is the ocean for for humanity in general, not only those that study biodiversity, but also for those that live in this planet, and all the ecosystem services that the ocean is providing should be reason enough really to make sure that we have a conscious effort to protect it. And also I think it's related to our own multilateral processes, because if we don't have a functioning BBNJ agreement soon, it will be very difficult to achieve the 30 by 38 target. And therefore, I think it's important to see that BBNJ will have this stepping stone role in order to get this major achievement that is agreed under the CBD. But also, I would argue that it's very important for the 2030 agenda, BBNJ, as a protected ocean. It also will mean easier access to a protected atmosphere and biodiversity and many other things that are such a cross-cutting issues in the 2030 agenda. And finally, I think it's important to have in mind that next year we'll have the United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice, in France, and there is a clear message from many quarters, not only from Costa Rica and France, which are the co-hosts of that conference, but from many countries, that maybe that's the moment where we should achieve the 60 ratification. And I think if we have that narrative in our minds, if we promote that idea, maybe it will serve as a reasonable threshold in time for many countries to aim to that point. And maybe we can celebrate in Nice the entering into force of the BBNJ agreement. So that's reasonable. It's 1 year. So I think we did it in like 2 months, but maybe Chile is an exception, very particular one. But I think 1 year from now on, I think it would be reasonable, and it would create a political momentum also to start implementing as soon as possible. And by the way, in just a couple of weeks, we will have a very important meeting in Costa Rica that prepares for that ocean conference in Nice. So again, you see the contributions from Latin America are very much alive.
Agreed. And thank you both. And thank you to the Wilson Center. And just one last exclamation point on the wonders of the ocean and the amazing thing that it was to get all the nations of the world to agree to the language of this agreement. And boy, I hope we get there in a year and have it fully ratified and entering into effect. Lisa, I'll pass it over to you again.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for participating today. It was really, really terrific. And I'm taking home lots of messages, including 60 ratifications by June 2025, preparing the institutional infrastructure that will be necessary to implement the treaty. I think, as Malette mentioned, that's very important. Figuring out relationships with the network of existing bodies, another task. And from our perspective, perhaps the most important is laying the groundwork for the first generation of high seas MPAs. And was really struck by what Julio said about the science is telling us we need to protect these areas. And your point, Monica, that these areas, undersea areas, even though we can't see them readily, they are the equivalent of, and here in the United States, the Yosemites, the Grand Canyons, the Yellowstones of the ocean. And we really need to protect them quickly. And there's no reason to delay. So many, many thanks to everyone for this terrific session. And thank you to the Wilson Center for hosting us today. Wishing all a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This video was produced by the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. If you'd like to see more, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. There you'll find in-depth discussions and research on important global issues and topics. And thanks for watching.